Hey, well, welcome to the Dream Labs. Dr. Contrast Live here. I just thought I'd take a quick minute and due to some time restraints here today, I want to go back and review some things prior to going into a session with the Shadow Man on Friday night. This coming, in fact, tomorrow evening, we'll be doing a live show with the Shadowkin and putting some final pieces together on this program with what I would call the QuadraWing, or I think we're calling it the Manicore, from what I understand. That seems to be the consensus of the name we're going to entitle this thing with. But I just thought I'd take a moment to go back and review some things here, and I've done some additional little thumbnail sketches for you to evaluate as we go through the process today. And just for what it's worth, this is where we were on Tuesday afternoon. I just went through some series of sketches. In fact, we did this last week prior to Tuesday, pardon me. But this was brought up on Tuesday's stream of this week, and I just thought I would bring it back for remembrance. There was a lot of conversation about these engine nacelles, literally a lot of things going on in terms of whether we go with a very large engine system like this, or a vertical system, or a horizontal system. And again, notice the slope here. I think that this view to me really catches the character of what we're after. There's something about this view. The stance is right. Some of the details aren't quite there yet, obviously, but I think the stance looks good. I think coming down the ground line with a little bit of sense of human scale gives it some sort of a really a reference about being a very massive, as we pointed out, some of the feedback from the earlier programs on Shadow's program, where was a vehicle, for example, anywhere from 25 to 40 meters in length, pretty massive ship. So I think this kind of tells us where we are as far as scale goes. So in that point, I mean, this elevation is a moot point. There's a bit of a different system here. But I think what I like most about this view is number one, it really signifies that dragonfly look we had, for example, and not the look. That was part of the process 2 or 3 weeks ago. We began with the idea of going to a dragonfly stance, looking at their elevation with a very round, bulbous head form, then a little bit of thorax, body system, and a real light, delicate tail section with wings, 4-wing system. That's why we got the name QuadraWing. But again, if you look at this stance here, it comes down, it just kind of sneaks in there and drops and slopes really nicely. So I'm going to go back and look at some of those things in terms of getting the character down for what we're after for the final go around, to put this into context with a nice series of renders. It might be this view that's chosen, modified to get the engines right and the stance correct. And there also might be something in attack mode, which I'll show in a few moments here. I've done some thumbnail studies on it. So we're going to start with this. Let's start to get the character to be regenerated or reestablished. And I think, because the reason being is we went from that sketch to looking at some of the feedback from the gang, pardon me, on the stream. Last week was to maybe, no, I take that back, last Friday evening, I'm sorry, to go back to maybe a vertical engine stance, and then maybe get those engines outboard on a stanchion, or just kind of separate a little bit from the body, much more of a vertical look, and again with the same wing drop and so forth. And this is in the landing position. This could be a landing position as well, but with the wings articulating, the outboard wings going uphill. But there was something about this view that we all looked at and said, you know, after the conversation on Tuesday afternoon, and again, that's the reason for the review here today, well, it just didn't have the same kind of real thin, lean look that the original sketch that we looked at just a few moments ago, this very dragonfly drooped wing system that seemed to be so prevalent and part of the research system here. So these are a couple of thumbnail sketches based on that, and then looking at just, again, the engine stance changed a bit. It went from, again, let me show you the difference here. It went from that look, which is that, to that. Pretty dramatic shift. I mean, this is where we were at the end of the conversation on Tuesday with this kind of a wing drop. And I think you'll agree, it has a lot more of an aggressive stance to it. This is interesting, very, very tough looking, very militaristic, but it didn't have the same stance that we're after with this very, very droop wing, multi-purpose attack vehicle we're calling the Manicore. So there's a comparison I want to make there. That's why we went to that system. These are a couple of pencil sketches based on the vertical engine systems, again, with the dihedrals up on top. These have become very functional. They're movable as well, much more delicate, but they do have the ability to move. Same in this view here as well. They're hidden behind this large nacelles, but there's one and there's the other. And then also this very tail section, for example, with this very, very round pod at the tail of this thing that has the ability to rotate and, under attack mode, begin to move and address the situation at hand. So there was a first pass at it. Then I went back to this. Interesting. I went right back to that whole process. Let me go back to a comparison here. Went back to the horizontal engine system. I don't know about you, but I think that really begins to tell a story about why this theme sketch really kind of set the tone. And when you put it back in a context like that, it just seems to have so much more character to it. I don't know if it's just the wing stance or the droop or the slope to it, but it really has a lot of, I think, some really good, pleasant but militaristic looking and very, very vicious looking, wicked character to it. Again, notice we stretched the nacelles of it. We weren't so sloped, but we kind of broke it a little bit to give a little bit of a wing. This is the articulation portion that'll move in flight. Again, coming back with the upper dihedrals, we were there and there with it. And again, here's the other view, for example, the wing drop. And giving it a sense of scale really helped to see, again, how massive this ship is. And really, quite frankly, when we take the vote, maybe tomorrow night, on Shadow's program, we might have a situation where we are looking at, this might be the final view. I don't know. I've done a couple of attack mode systems here. We'll let you see what that might look like here in a moment. But again, this is where we were from, again, let's go back to this guy. The vertical engine system as opposed to that. I don't know how you feel about it, but there's no comparison. I think this has a lot more aggression into it. We got that same bulbous kind of opened up cockpit area that we kind of widened out from last Tuesday's stream. And we also shifted gears from the vertical to the horizontal, which I think gives a real lean, mean look to it. Much more dragon flying character. And again, I want to stress we're not naming it that, but that was the beginning of the whole process. That started the origin of the design concept phase. So there we are with those two. And let's carry on here with just a little bit more conversation. So once we got that, once I got that view established, what I did next was take that same view and try to work it into an attack mode. For example, what does that look like in flight, coming at you, for example, with a lot more interest or a little more emphasis on some of the stance itself. Now the details aren't quite. This is a bit of a different system here. Notice we're a little bit more unique in terms of this guy. Let's drop this down a little bit. This has there's enough there, I think, to be able to see it. What I liked about this view was the mode looked good, the position looked good, but I think we have to really stretch it to get more of this look here into the actual final attack mode if we choose to be the rendering, the final rendering of the final variation on this theme. Also like the fact that this is a little newer down here with this nacelle system, the secondary engine process being much more fan related or rib related as opposed to being a typical intake. That might change character too. We simplified the wing structure quite a bit from this one. Is much more simplified than that. It's a little more complex. So we kind of stretch this out a little bit and get a little more of that wing drop. I think we're in pretty good shape as for getting that final mode to kind of put together as part of the sequence here in battle form. So very interesting. I think, let me stop here for a moment. If there's anybody viewing out there, any input at all that you might have in terms of what that's the attack mode. And while I've got this up, we'll make some revisions, for example, on the engine systems, simplify the wings, get a little bit more of a secondary engine system, a little more nacelle related, and a little newer looking, and a little more aggressive. And again, come back to that captive, that move this wing, the engine systems and the nacelles rivered a little bit, and then drop them, and really get that wing system to kind of get that stance corrected, and back to Dragonfly as part of the theme. Again, notice the upper dihedrals are still there, but on this side, on the left-hand side, and then this one on the right-hand side. Obscured a little bit because of the engine nacelle, because there's quite a bit of a lift in that carrier for the engine itself. Also, a little bit more of a boom system. Notice we changed a little bit of the character of the gunner system back there. It's a single gun up on top, but again, still rotates and begins to work into an attack mode. Not quite happy with the bulk of this. Maybe we'll stretch this out a little bit more and get more of the thinness that we're having in that original sketch. But I think the idea here is if this view looks good, I'll modify the front a little bit wider, get a little more stance to it, like the original sketch of that little red pencil study we showed you a few moments ago. And at the same time, this will be kind of a nice combination for, and I'm not going to illustrate, one of the goals I do have when it's all said and done is to not illustrate this as a single vehicle. I'm going to go back and look a squadron. Maybe there's one here, one behind it, a little bit smaller in the distance, so we've got an attack mode run, and put a bit of color behind it for the final presentation. And the final piece will be 11 by 17. And again, I don't know if it's going to be the attack mode with a dual squadron or back to that ground stance. In fact, we might do both. I'm not sure. We'll have to find out what Shadowkin thinks in terms of putting together the final process, and ultimately what your votes are going to be in putting the whole program together. Is it going to be one or the other as a single illustration? Is it going to be a second illustration to go out there for publication or print format? We shall see. So let's go back to this. I'm going to go back and revert here for a moment, and I'll come back and review these in the end here. Let's go back to look at this now. If you remember, on Tuesday afternoon, at the end of the day, we went back to this sketch. This again, we'll go back again. You can come back to this final study here of this red pencil sketch. But this is where we were in terms of there was the actual red pencil sketch itself. That wing really droops. Again, I really love that character about this thing. And then at the end of Tuesday's stream this week, I just wrapped out based on the input coming in from the audience or the participants. I came back in and really did a little rough pencil sketch about what this character is going to look like. Thus, the second sketch we did here, which is right on that side right there. That's a variation on theme right there, taking that real rough sketch, this one, on Tuesday. And then let me drop this just a bit so we can see where we are here. There we are. How's that, gang? So this little rough sketch was done at the end of the session on Tuesday to get back to that horizontal group system. Then this sketch was a refinement off of this study. But I still think this is probably the thing we're going to work with. So let me move along here based on the time factor we have here because of the situation that I'm under today. This is the theme sketch. We started there. Then I went back to the engine system here, looking at maybe an attack mode shot of this thing, overhead 3/4 front. Again, if we chose this view, I'd go back and modify the engine system itself, because we're really not quite there yet with this, and then really bulk up the front and get more of that slope. That the original pencil sketch in red had that long, real solid, strong slope up front, and the hooded system which is articulating, is interesting as well. Notice a little bit of a difference in the gun pod here, back to the 4-barrel system. An extended tail on a Dragonfly, and then these dihedrals going vertical, which would move, for example, up and down, and then maybe fluctuate right and left over the top of the nacelles of the engine. Again, this, once modified, is going to have it might be an interesting stance. So there's one theme right there we can work with. So that's that guy. Let me move these over just a bit so we can kind of categorize them. Pardon me. Just a moment. There it is. And then we have this gang coming up. Here's another view here, for example, of that same. Now this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with these horizontal, long, thin engine systems. It's a little bit weak up front here. I want to beef that up just a bit. Go back to the original thumbnail sketch, but this gives us a pretty good angle on what that attack mode might be. Imagine this as one vehicle, and then maybe up in the distance, up into this area here, a second attack vehicle coming in behind it. Notice again, the dihedrals are up, much more gossamer, very, very light, the delicate look out of Dragonfly. And then this would be the engine. It's a little weak back in through here. I didn't get more bulk in that engine system here. And then this, again, shows the end cap dihedrals going vertical into a dive mode. So that would move as well. So that's part of that process. Another thumbnail sketch. Looking at it coming in from the other view, this gets a little bit healthier. It's showing us a little bit more bulk. Again, it's not quite the same engine system. I'm just using this as a view, for example, to discuss where we're going to go with this thing tomorrow night's program with the Shadow Man. But again, notice, I think the stance is getting better. A little bit more bulk in this thing. I've had some beef. Changing this lower nacelle, it's a bit on the fussy side. And then going back to more of the horizontal look, which is really going to change the character of this wing dihedral. Which is going to be interesting as well, because once that stretch comes into play here, and then it begins to drop or go uphill, it could be a very interesting composition. So those are the things we're looking at. It's not quite there yet. There's a lot of neat things to be discussed about it. There's a lot of great features about it, but we really haven't got the real quite view yet that's really going to do the job for us. So, and again, notice the upper dihedrals are still in motion behind the engine nacelles themselves. They rise above, and they can, again, move, articulate all the way vertical, all the way down, almost flat laying on top of the nacelle in the other view. So that's another shot at it here. And then I went back to another mode here. This is interesting. Went back to another view here. Just didn't finish the sketch, but it gives us a little sneak preview of what that real stretch look could look like. I mean, look at the difference, for example, between this view here and that view. We can get them together here, just show. What I want to illustrate here is the difference in the wing structure. Look how all of a sudden it begins to look a lot fresher and a lot more wicked, much more wicked in terms of being formatted with these very vertical. So it's still not gutty enough yet, but I think the stance is different, and we make more bulk out of that and stretch this a little bit more and then drop this wing system down. And again, get much more bulk into this and revise this lower piece with that fin system we were looking at earlier. I think it'd be a very, very interesting approach to take here with the process itself. So that's another one we're looking at here. And then last but not least, we've shifted gears again. Now this is interesting. This takes advantage of both. Look how the view's shifted here. Now a little bit more uphill, a little more downhill run in this thing. but really interesting. Look how that changes the character of that look. Again, not happy with the nacelle down here, for example. We'll go back in and get that fin system and change the orientation of it so it's got this to this, that counterpoint. But again, notice that real thin engine system, and then again, the exhaust system back here, the attack system behind it, same kind of approach we're looking at, but that round turret system, then the dihedrals above and behind the engine nacelles. Really interesting, I think, as far as the format goes. So I think all the characteristics or all the personalities of the thing we're looking for this Manticore attack vehicle is interesting and solid. We just have to put all the pieces together, and that'll be the task for me to do in the next few days. Just review here in terms of sketch rendering format. And again, last but not least, a little bit weak in the front here. I want to really take more advantage of getting some bulk in this front end character like we did in the original pencil sketch, where it really drops and has a lot more slope to it as opposed to being so vertical. This almost looks helicopter-like, and I don't want to look at that from that point of view. I want to get much more of that mass where we actually drop that front end down and really do a nice job of getting this thing substantiated as a real solid process. Very, very solid. All the way through. So, but I think the view selection, I like this attack mode view as much as I do. Let me find the one I've got back here. There's a couple of them here that I think really have the right idea as far as attack mode goes. I think that one as well. It's it's a little steeper, but the same approach. And I think that's the one we're looking at. Yep. I just think it's got a lot more character to it. Notice again, it's got a lot of downhill run to it, a lot of really extreme dive to it, which I think would be pretty dramatic in a sketch rendering format. And again, imagine this as a primary vehicle enlarged on the 11 by 17 format, and then this behind it is another vehicle joining it in terms of the attack mode. So I think both of these views really look well, serve us well for the attack process we're dealing with. So all again to really look at what we're dealing with here. Again, going back to the original sketch, much more horizontal in the wings of the engine systems, bulking up the front end, keeping the dihedrals and that real long tail section that's segmented for that could move as well. But Captain Nemo made a comment on Tuesday. Maybe this whole tail section has the ability to articulate up and down and right and left, so it moves as well under attack mode. Pretty complicated, but nonetheless could be very, very useful. And then last but not least, the view to me looks good here. I really like this, that stance or the aggressive look to it. And again, adding a piece behind it. And then last but not least, just for what it's worth, I snuck into just a little bit of a color study here of what this thing might look like as well. This is one palette at it. I'm not saying that this is the final, but again, notice we've got a little bit more. This fan system underneath that's a little more intriguing. I think as far as color breakups, do we want to go mechanical all the way through and add a little bit of color accent? Is it yellow, orange? Is it bright blue? I'm not sure yet. We're going to let the audience determine that probably tomorrow night. But I think this gives us some idea of what that color system might look like. Again, much more aggressive. I think we need to get a little bit bulkier back through here, stretch this out a little bit more, and get this wing to drop more so we have more of a stance to it. I love that first, that red pencil sketch where it really shows that drop. And again, this is a very odd view because notice that wing as it fractures and breaks. You're going to see very little on the other side there where that wing is doing. But again, here's that dihedral that sits on top of the engine nacelle and has a much more delicate look to it. So we're going to try and keep that flavor to it. And one last feature we added that might be interesting. Once we increase the bulk up front here and extend the nacelles and get all these pieces put together, notice a little bit of a different conveyance back here in the turret section as well. I'm going to go back to that round system to keep it much more dragonfly-like. But there's one other thing I think it was really interesting. We added this air breather here to kind of go into an external dump for both engines right and left. So the ducting work can kind of breathe in and then overhead and dump into the engine system as well. So it's a real run in terms of do we keep it mechanical? Do we want to go all very much more evil? Do we want to make it look more of a presence of being evil, yet a combination of color platelets or armor and so forth? We'll let that become part of the judge tomorrow night, I'm sure. I'm not opposed to adding a bit of color. Maybe there's too much of it. Maybe there's just a little bit here on the wing systems. This is all very mechanical. Those are the things we can look at. Hey, how you doing, Chip? How you doing, man? Good to see you, Doctor. Everything okay? I'm just on a bit of a time crunch here today, Chip. I'm just trying to go through some review pieces here. And if you'd like me to, I'll go back through it again just to kind of bring you up to speed. That be okay with you? Go back since you missed a little bit here. Thanks for joining in, by the way. Hey, color is neat. Yeah, well, I don't know if that, like I said, Chip, I'm not quite sure yet we want to go this. This is like a little test bed from where we were from last Tuesday. And while I'm at it, let me go back and go through these things here, Chip, for you, just for a second. So this is what we ended up with. If you remember, let me put that aside for a moment here. If you remember, this whole process started with, we came back to this sketch, so to speak, as a bit of a theme master. And that was interesting how that whole stance, this whole stance came about. On Tuesday, we decided that the engine system that we had, for example, this look, let me kind of organize here for a minute. Yeah, this look was a modification from this look. And I think the difference is pretty significant. Look at the difference in the stance here, Chip, from where we were. The stance, the sleekness. I think this to me has a much more character to it. I mean, it's an early sketch, but we went from this horizontal drop system to these very, very large vertical, almost what I refer to as vertical nacelles. It worked okay, but it just took away some of that really, that dragonfly, that drop system to it that I think is really, to me, paramount. So I went from that sketch to this sketch. What do you think? This, to me, was a variation on theme. When you get that ground view put together here, I thought was really interesting in terms of what that was going to do. What do you think in terms of going from, notice, the relationship, getting a much more stretch in the stance, stretching the engine nacelles out, and then getting a lot more character in this thing, and then really keeping the beef up front and hitting that tail section with a different gun turret system up on top. Oops, we're out of the image there. How's that? What do you think, Chip? Yeah, I think this one, the upper piece. Yeah, I think the upper, if you're referring to the upper one, I think that's the one. I think the upper one is really, has a lot of character. It just takes it away. It looks leaner, it looks much more aggressive, and has much more of a stance than this guy does. I mean, I'm not opposed to that look, but it was a request from last Friday night's show about going to vertical engine systems, and it just didn't, it's okay, but it doesn't have the same stance. This almost looks conventional. Whereas in my opinion, this looks really aggressive. So thanks for the input there, Chip. I won't go into the detail here. Let me just show you one more thing. Once those are resolved, I went to that view where it's like an attack stance, where all of a sudden we begin to look at this thing with a different flavor in terms of, and I'm going to go back and modify the engine nacelles here. This is the first pass at getting more of an attack look here. Tail section, upper dihedrals, but again, modifying, a little bit complicated in here, but just kind of simplifying these nacelles and getting more of that wing drop, like that sketch I just showed you here. An aggressive angle. But yeah, that's the one I want to get there. But again, bulking this up and really getting that slope. And again, back to that red pencil sketch. What I'm missing here is that slope really drops, then really comes down, adds more mass to it. What do you think, Chip? Is this a pretty acceptable attack view? Pretty cool. Thank you for joining me here. I really appreciate it. So that's where we are with the attack mode here. Excuse me. I think that makes a lot of sense. So that's a. Let me carry on here. I prefer a bit more slope. Yeah, you want to go a little deeper? Just change the angle a little bit more of that, or more of that. Less slope or more slope? Yeah, on the nose. Yeah, I agree. It's too stiff here. I think go back to that original. Let's look at the drop on this sketch here. This is what I'm referring to, Chip. And I'm going to modify this once we go through. Look at the drop in that slope right there. I mean, that thing has a lot of character. It's up, it rises up, slopes, and then drops again. That's what's missing in some of the other sketches. It's missing here. So that's got to come up, drop, and then drop again. So there's going to be a double compound there in front of a bus. Yeah, in front of a bus. It's true. That's a good analogy, Chip. Thanks. So there we are. So there we are with that family of studies. Then I went back, if you remember, Chip, last Tuesday, we ended up the program with a little thumbnail sketch, going back to this look. I just think this has a lot more. Again, we're missing that thing you're talking about, that slope in the front of the nose. But we started there. We ended, for example, we ended Tuesday with this, going back to the horizontal look. Then I went to this as an attack mode, different engine system. I'll go very quickly here. Then I went back to this, again, in attack mode. This isn't bad, but if we change the character of the engine cells, not bad. And again, I went to this. Let me just kind of rotate this over a little bit here. Then I went to this one, which kind of showed you where the horizontal wings are, but it's not quite aggressive enough, and it still has that real slim look to it up front. So that was another study we did. Then this one was a different set of engine systems. Again, well, we went back to the horizontal piece, but it just looks too thin. Missing a lot of the bulk that we had to. And then we went back to this guy. This one, to me, had a nice stance to it, I think, as far as the attack mode. Now, again, we'll bulk to get that slope working. We're going to go downhill again to get much more slope to it. And again, a little bit bulkier in the engine systems. And again, I like the fact that this has a nice, and again, this little system down below the secondary engines, we'll go back to that fin system I'll show you in a moment here. So that's what we're looking at here as far as attack mode. So I'm just taking today to kind of review where we are in preparation for tomorrow night's show with the Shadow Man. Yep, the proportions are right on this one. Yeah, I think the proportion looks good. I mean, just really coming along and dropping it, getting a little more aggressive with this guy. And then last but not least, I went back and did this. This is where we ended up, a little color study. I'm not saying we're there yet, but I think it's interesting. We'll modify some of the wing systems. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit and put more drop in the wings and get a lot more character. Very delicate with the upper dihedrals. Back to a different turret system. I don't know if this is long enough yet. We'll go back to that round piece, and we'll let that become part of the judging system here. But again, what do you think about the color breakup? Should we add a little bit of color to it or keep it all very mechanical? Just wait for your input here. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that's, I'm in the same boat, Chip. I'm not sure if we're going to go mechanical or color, but we can try both before we go to a final variation on the rendering theme here. But that's where we are today. I just think it's, once we get, this starts to look pretty good up and through here. Get a little bit more bulk to it. We might want to stretch out a little bit. But the real problem here is to get that slope to work for us up front. That's going to be really critical. So that's my task between now and tomorrow night. I'm going to go back. I'm going to bring these same sketches along tomorrow night's show. Begin to review some of this stuff here on Shadow's program, and then we'll get some good consensus and then put it all together in terms of a final presentation and setup. So anything in closing here, Chip? I've got to fly here very quickly. Anything in closing about the content? If you're a military ship, it should be more toned down. Yeah, I think so too. I think it should be much more less color and a lot more, maybe just enough, a little bit of sky tone in it, a little bit of mechanical look, and maybe a little bit darker in some of the much more evil looking. I think that's a great call, Chip. That's how I feel. I think going to a color almost looks like it's more of a taxi system in this case, or a bus system. Not quite what we're after. I think I'd like to keep that sinister tone to it and keep it very all tones of grays. I think so. I think we're getting really close. A lot of study being done here, but I think we're finally, over the last few days, pulling back and just going back in. Yeah, lots of missiles. We get that all underneath the carriage there. That'll be taken care of. But over the last few days, just slowing it all down and getting a lot more content in terms of the stance have to be correct, proportion of engines correct, the nacelle system has to be correct. The dihedrals on the upper, for example, these guys looking pretty good as far as balance goes. Maybe a little more slope to them. I don't know. We'll see what takes place here in the other in the next few days or so. But hopefully tomorrow night's stream with Shadowkin will kind of resolve some of these things. We put these things out for vote, and then we'll go from there in terms of wrapping it all up. So once again, Chip, anything in closing here? Do you want to add? Really appreciate you taking time to join me today. Really good stuff. Great input as usual. I really appreciate you taking the time. Anything at all in closing? Hey, very good. I guess for now. Hey, by the way, Chip, if you have anybody that's interested in the program and what I'm doing here, please pass my name along as far as timing goes for the show. I really appreciate you being on board, but if you've got any friends that are interested in looking at this stuff, please pass it along. And take a moment, look at my website, drcontrast.com. I'd love to do that, have you a look at that. And if you have anything you want to add to these things, Chip, feel free to drop me a note at my email address at drcontrast.com. I'll be more than happy to comply with some things you'd like to see done in the future here. So once again, thank you so much for the time here, Chip, and it's always good to have you on board. And really, I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's program with the Shadow at 10 o'clock. We'll be going through the final variation on getting some boat systems down for the final go-around and what the vehicle looks like, and but also the character of we're going to do one illustration, we're going to do two. We'll find out from the group as we go through this process tomorrow night. So once again, feel free to visit my website, drcontrast.com, and drop me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. drcontrast.com. Really cool. Really appreciate the time, Chip. And again, in closing, I really believe with all of my heart, and I really close with this every time we get together. Never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you really are. Thanks, gang. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow night at Chip and again. We'll be on the Shadowkins program at 10 o'clock and finalize all this stuff. Thanks, gang. Have a great day and take care. Bye-bye now.